Popper 33. Like, this is a beast, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I have to say though, it is one of those ones, it's like, it looks scary, and it feels scary. And I would say until about 20 minutes before I saw you today, I was like, we'll see if this happens. We'll see if I get this. But there's a lot of comfort in knowing that probably everyone feels this way whenever they have to play it, like, to anyone, so.
I think so. So, I actually, again, never learned this, but in my Popper book, you'll be glad to know I had it opened at this page. And on top of it, I mean, that's a start for me, right? On top of it, I wrote Yale, because obviously for one of my auditions, at some point, there were like 3 or 4 Popper Etudes, and this was one of them set for your entrance audition for Yale.
Oh my god.
So, I definitely didn't pick it, because I've never played it. But at the time, I remember thinking, like, how would you approach this one? So I'm really glad that now I actually know how to approach it, which is quite nice.
Do you know, I had, so like, when I was at Indiana, a lot of times people would bring studies to Starker, and it was a normal thing. You might have experienced this actually at the summer school. The summer session, I can't remember his name, Mark somebody. He was like principal cellist of the Honolulu Symphony. Oh, cool. And he used to come in the summer. Was he there ever when you were there? He'd come like lead the orchestra.
So he might have, but I can't remember.
So all these like guys, you know, some of them were ex-Starker students, but they come in and have a lesson with Starker, even though, you know. And I remember this dude playing Popper 33, and I was like, I will never be able to do that. Like, it was super fast too. And I was relieved to find out that the Bärenreiter edition suggests 60 per crotchet for this, because I was like, oh, okay. This guy played it way faster than that.
But I mean, a lot of people do play it faster, and obviously the benefit for playing it faster is that there's not so much weight going on your thumb for so long. So actually it's probably less tiring to play it faster.
True.
But also I found it very interesting that you know, somehow you have to get a feeling of lightness in it while not putting too much weight. You don't actually need the weight for every single note.
Yeah.
So there are times where you can actually release a little bit.
When I practiced this, I almost did it like a lot of it almost like a flautando sort of feeling, or harmonic sort of thing in the hand, you know. Flautando's not the right word, but it was, you know,
I should have done
sort of just half pressing down the string.
I can definitely feel my thumb is like not happy that I'm gonna have to play this now. I think I spent way too much time today trying to play.
I think the thing about playing it faster for me, I mean, obviously we'll delve into this, it's all about those hand positions and thumb, isn't it? Along with the shifts. But I find, you know, my brain might not be as fast as some people's, but I just need the extra time to make sure the intonation's like at least close to accurate. I feel like when it's so fast, I mean, if you can do it fast, that's amazing, but those quick changes in thumb hand position to get really, really perfectly in tune is quite a challenge.
I think this is the same thing that we say every week, is that if we had 3 months to prepare this, you know, I think it's quite an achievement to get this to a playing standard in a week's time. But once you actually then, because this is not an easy one to bring to the table in a week. It's just not.
No.
Thankfully, we've done a few thumb ones before, so I think that's not so much of an issue.
Yeah.
So at least we've built up the strength of that over the previous weeks. But I think if we had 2 or 3 months on this, you'd know the pattern so intrinsically from repetition every single day that it would be much easier, and you just already have that built in. I'm still at the stage where I know that's a major third and that's a minor third, but sometimes I kind of have to give a little bit of an edge to see. There's a lot of detail here. A lot of detail.
There is. And you're right, 2 things you've just said. One, the patterns of it. I mean, again, I think if you had a few more weeks to practice, or I had a few more weeks, it would be just so inherently in there, those different shifts in hand patterns. But this is one where I think of it, I don't know if you think of it this way, and I always use different terms for different students, but as kind of like 4 main thumb positions. You have the major one, you have the minor one, then you have the minor extension, and then you have the 3 whole step. So,
Oh, cool. Yeah.
major
That's great
extension.
Great
I
way of
don't
doing
think
it.
we use that one actually at all in this, unless you do some different fingerings. But
No.
I think it's
Don't think
only
so.
the major, the minor, and then the extension backwards.
Yeah,
One.
that would be really good to isolate that type of thought process as you're going through. I definitely didn't do that in my practice because I wasn't that organised. Well done, you.
Well, it's the only. I think it's the only chance I have of playing it in tune is writing those in actually, and I wrote a lot of them in. I mean, the thing that's the other bonus with this one is that it's super tiring because it's 3 pages, but the patterns do repeat.
Yes.
So the opening, however many lines is it, right? The opening 4 lines, you have that same left-hand pattern come back 3 or 4 times, I think.
Yes.
3
and
times.
That really does help. Yeah. So at least you know when you get there, okay, we have some time. But ironically, I also find that particular area the most tiring for my thumb. So even though mentally it's a break, when you get there, it's actually the interim pieces that for me give me a time to just relax and shift up, do something that feels like normal cello playing.
Yeah.
So when I started this, I definitely would have taken out the octaves first, which I assume you would have done at the same time.
Yeah.
And that really helped, but like you were saying, as far as my hand pattern went, what I ended up doing a couple of days afterwards was that kind of practice where I did all 3 double stops.
That's that's really good.
I don't know if you can see what I'm doing in the melee of
No, I
sound
can.
I just did there, but I think that was the main issue for me. When I just did the octaves, it really didn't solidify the major or minor quality of what I was doing in the tonality. So I just noticed that the sometimes wouldn't be totally centered until I did that kind of practice, and then I found I was much more organized. You probably got there much faster with your major, minor,
I don't know. Well, I'm really jealous I didn't think to practice the other double stops, because I think that is like just probably the best thing you can do to make sure your intonation's really secure, apart from, once you have, it's a 2-part thing, isn't it, with this one? It's 1 is the hand position, and 2 is like knowing your geography of your octaves. And I think like the way I sort of organized it was separating those 2 aspects. So like, okay, if I play something and it's out of tune, is it out of tune because the shift was off, or is it out of tune because my positioning is off? And I think that's such an excellent way to practice those with all the different double stops in.
Well, thank you. And as do I think that your way of organizing in your head, is it a major, minor, extended position? So I think a mix of both of those practice things would be very, very helpful for anybody just starting this off. Obviously there's a lovely kind of diminished, beautiful moment where we get a chance to have a bit more of a sweeping line. When we got to bar 16, that's interesting there, because you need your thumb over the middle 2 strings, right?
Yeah.
So for me, did you have your thumb over the middle 2 strings in the previous couple of bars as well?
I think I moved as I went, actually, a little bit. But it'd be probably better to anticipate that. Anyway, go on. What were you going to say?
I also did move 100%, but when I got to here, I found that as soon as you have the thumb down, you have to make sure, even if it's here, over the A and the D, move over. So it's over the 2 middle strings. I didn't necessarily need it. It seemed to me like it was an extra movement to go over to the G and C. So to just use the hand doing this motion, getting the weight over, and that seemed to work when it was balanced in the middle 2 for me. Organising, no matter what it is that you do with your thumb, being aware of what you're doing with your thumb is quite a grounding factor.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I hadn't thought about it that way at all in those 2 bars, but those 2 bars and then the next 2 bars where it's a half step higher. I mean, it's kind of, in a way, everything is constant about those except for this one shift. So if you use that to help structure how you approach it, it's really useful. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing with stuff like this too. Anywhere you can find patterns, or anywhere you can find like a way to make more information seem like less information, it's just going to help you, because you can get really overwhelmed in your head if you're not looking for those things.
It seems like a lot of black print on a page. When people look at this, I think that's why people skip it. But even what we said before, organising the first 4 lines and then finding them in the second page and the third page and just bracketing them off so you know you don't have to learn all of that. Really, it turns this then into a study that's only a page and a half, which is much more achievable, right?
Plus the added bonus of being exhausted.
Well, exactly. I found when you get to 54, suddenly you have to play this forte section, and it's beautiful. I mean, what gorgeous harmonies. But by the time you're there, like, your hand is just like, no.
Yeah.
Just no.
I know. I mean, it's cool. It's one of those things, I think, it is fortissimo. And it's suddenly forte, that one.
Yeah, exactly.
At least in my edition. So, I guess as much of that, like, breather as you can before, but it's kind of easier said than done.
Exactly. You have to get to the end at that point. What did you think of bars 20 and 21?
With the fourth finger business, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I just did, I find that note always needs a little bit more bow contact because it's just that much higher than the others. So I found I needed to lean into that quite a bit more with the bow so that it didn't just sort of squeak.
Yeah.
But also there's, for me, a lot of rotational stuff happening with the fourth finger is that what you were going to talk about?
Yeah, exactly that it doesn't lie. I can't just do it this way and stay in a nice position. I have to do this quite a lot. And that can make the bow awkward if you're not paying attention. So trying to get that all nice and easily. I do, however, do a dramatic slowdown at the end of that bar 21 because I feel like I should.
It's got to be done. It's got to be done. Beautiful. Well, it's also that whole question. So you're supposed to do this next section in the upper half.
Yeah.
And getting out there. I mean, because you're on an up bow for that last bit.
Yeah.
So do you just save a lot of bow, or do you do a whole lot on the...
I actually 100% just did a lot of... I kind of edged out. Yeah, so cheated 100%. I suppose I should try and save a little bit of bow this time. But see how we get on.
I think, to be honest, I usually forget and do something like that, or use the first bar to head out that way.
Yeah.
It's very tricky for the bow. It's very tricky, and it's that whole thing. I can't remember. Somebody in Cleveland told me this, but it's that whole thing, right? If you're out at the edge of the bow, this is such a more vulnerable position as like a human being than this, where you're protected. So it just feels that much more insecure. Yeah.
Yeah.
This feels very insecure. And so I think having like real contact with the bow and feeling really like as much grounded weight you can channel in there, even though it's piano and at the tip, it sort of helps that. But
and also the circles, it's all obviously the same direction. I don't know if you can see my hand, but we're literally doing a clockwise circle the whole time. So you just keep rowing that boat.
Yeah, set it and forget it.
Exactly. And then deal with the left hand, Focus on that then. How did you feel about the funniest area for me? Definitely harmonically was this whole bars 34, 35.
33. Oh yeah, all that stuff. That I thought was the trickiest part for intonation.
Yes.
And it is one of those things, those harmonies sound freaking awesome if they're like perfectly in tune, and they sound atrocious if they're just a little bit off.
Exactly. So how did you approach them?
Well, so again, I did the hand, my 3 different positions for this. And what's surprising, right, is what I noticed for me, and I wonder if this would happen with other people. A lot of times when you see something that's like either flat keys or what you perceive as a relative, like a minor tonal area within the key you're in, your hand automatically wants to do this minor position thing. And that is not always the case. So, like, if you look at the bar before, subconsciously I always think, I'm going to a minor key, so I need to do a minor hand position, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
So, I think stuff like that. But then the bars you were talking about specifically, I mean, again, I do a lot of the just making sure that's really in tune. And then the interesting thing about this, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all in major position, those two bars, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I would have put my energy into that, realizing that's all the same and sort of the way it changes as you shift.
That sounds great. I mean, I love all of that. I was laughing because in my head, so the last beat of bar 33,
Yes.
going to totally understandable.
Oh, yeah.
So you'd expect the next thing would be, but it's not. It's so I was like, come on, there's a break in the pattern. That's not helping me. So
that's true, actually.
I just found it really fascinating that I had to hear this harmony. What is it? I really had to do, the semitone shift back, semitone, tone, tone in the thumb. And mostly if I paid less attention to the harmony, it seemed to work out better. That's
interesting.
Yeah, I just found that focusing on hand position there helped me more, even though I know exactly what that is. It's just that really messed with my head.
It's one of those things I have to say, and you've probably maybe never experienced this in your life because you've played piano. But I remember when I started my undergrad and certain harmonies, just because I wasn't raised in the tradition of having that intensity of focus on tonal areas, this would have been so hard for me when I was 18. I would have had to play the chords over and over and over again on the piano, really get them in my ear. And I think that's the thing, what you're saying. It's super, it's great. We have in cello, it's great to be able to rely on, your positions.
Yeah.
But I think if you want to absolutely nail it, understanding, it's hard for me to explain it better than that now from where I am, but I just know it would be super hard. And of course, when you've been playing crazy contemporary music, I mean, sometimes you have to do these shifts and it's there's no other way to hear it apart from somehow relating it to the muscle memory as well, as you know.
Yeah, so I think the big thing is that you need to practice it both ways. So that you know what your notes are on top, and then go back to your double stop practice as well. You can always relate to your open strings. See the D in the second semiquaver, bar 34, so super easy because we're just resolving. Here, that is a seventh, but your thumb is shifting semitone, right? So it's always the first one. Second one's always really easy, right?
Yeah. It's
so
every 2 beats, yeah.
Yeah, no, I just was saying that I love approaching it from loads of different angles so that hopefully every part of my subconscious just works it out when I'm asleep.
Yeah, and it's that whole thing, right? If there's one version of this that seems to speak to you, anyone who's watching, they could, you really can, you go with that, but it's so good to know different ways to approach it, and it's ultimately going to be better, I think, if you have many different approaches.
Practice a way that makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So that when you practice your own way as well, the combined effort, makes the power of one.
Oh yeah. I mean, I can't think of an example off the top of my head for something like this, but there will definitely be places in music, in repertoire,
100%.
where you have to be able to do the 3 different ways or 3 different approaches, and your usual way is not going to work.
Things like Verkehr to Nacht, or, there's a lot of chordal harmonies in there. If you're playing the chamber music part, you really need to be able to sing the intervals, to be able to understand your note coming out of something very, very different. So, not that that's...
I mean, the great thing I didn't even think about this week, but this would be so good for, again, is like, playing your thirds and stuff harmonically, and having this understanding of when, in what chord you need to have the tendency in the note. So like for chamber music and inflection in your phrasing and stuff. It's just amazing. The one other thing I thought was the, just with the main thing at the beginning, it's so easy, I think, to at first approach, and we talked all about this octaves, but because the third finger is the first one to come down, if you're not used to it, it's really easy to just try to shift with the third finger, and it's going to be so hard to get it in tune, I think. I mean, maybe some people can do it, but I think we've talked about that in probably every single thummy popper we've done, but you always have to shift with the sense of that. So
it needs to be a link note, really. So kind of the... If I played the rest of them in tune, but that it actually is, you're practicing in the timing. Is that the way that you would have practiced it?
Yeah, that's such a good demonstration. Absolutely. And I think, again, like when you do that, you don't have to use a lot of weight, actually. It works better sometimes, especially that one, since starts on a harmonic.
It did strike me as interesting that I wanted to do it here, there, and here. The timing of with the bow was so important. So things that I noticed were that I might not quite get up. So I would definitely practice that slowly with all of your connections very carefully done. And the other thing I noticed about myself was that sometimes I was a bit lazy getting down to the second string, time-wise, when it's a bit faster.
Yeah, interesting. I mean...
that's not necessarily a problem everyone will have, but just for clarity at the end, that if I was slightly not exactly in time, it was generally my string crossing. And I don't have any problems with it. It's just that maybe I was having a lazy day and I need to anticipate earlier.
It's an important thing, and I'm sure you tell students this all the time. A lot of times when we think the problem is our left hand, it could be the bow, and this is no different, because you can be having everything super structured, but the bow is lazy and it's late, and so the shift is flat. Yeah. And, you get there on the next beat, but anyway.
Too late.
Thing. All right, I think it's time.
Let's do it. Okay, who's going first today?
I think it's my turn to go
nice.
First.
I'm
Say
delighted.
my prayers. I'm going to take my head. Thanks.
Thank you.
As I thought. It was more confusing though, playing it
Really?
through to somebody. Yeah, my head felt really like confused in a lot.
You know, I feel like that's ahead of me. You had a lovely like relaxed sound, because I noticed when I play this I'm like, oh, you know, the way my brain feels at the time.
Yeah. It is like, you made it sound really easy, Ailbhe, I have to say.
Did
You really did. Yeah, you did. And do you know, I think the thing is, like, props to you, because I bet there's so many people that are like, there is no way you can make this sound musical. This is a study. This one is study of studies. And it sounded so musical.
Oh,
it really did.
Isn't that great? I'm delighted to hear that. Because inside, all you could hear in my head was screaming. You know,
I know, inside it's like blind panic. It's like, why isn't this thing working? Do you hear what I'm saying, though, about it's confusing? Like, those harmonies, you get there and you're like, what?
Well, especially at the end. I mean, the middle bit, I was laughing because, you know, that's funny. But at the end, you're tired in your left hand, but you're also mentally exhausted. Like, it's too long for just pure... Until you've played this a long time, I think. It's going to be one of those that will always catch one just, oh, forgot that. You know, that was my minor whoops.
Sometimes I'll have to share a famous story of when I did the Brahms F major sonata, which everyone knows is the first movement's pretty tricky and the slow movement is tricky, and the last movement's kind of, you know, a dawdle. I mean, as much as Brahms can be, but I played this whole sonata. I'm just going to tell the story. I played the whole sonata. It was awesome, and I got to the last page and I just like stopped concentrating and like, I don't know,
so
got
classic.
really off or something. It's just, yeah, typical, isn't it?
I'm going to give you another one, which is the worst I've ever done in my entire life. I was playing Dvorak Concerto in the National Concert Hall, and I literally played it out of my skin, delighted with myself, and then the very last chord, and it was a real lesson for me to go, Ailbhe, your concentration should never stop until you're standing up. And I went. So I actually did it. And everything else, like I totally nailed, was delighted with myself.
Oh, but you know, that's the
last shift.
Don't you know that famous recently discovered edition where there's a, you know, semitone, quarter tone above the last note? It's for, you know, dramatic.
Oh, so I did it intentionally, yeah. Yeah, that's
anyway.
what I told myself afterwards. So
That's great.
Which is awesome.
Woohoo!
Awesome.
I know. What a great way to end a week and look forward to a week off from Potter. Well-deserved
Absolutely.
week off.
I think we deserve it after this one.
Yes.
Super fun as always, my dear.
Yes, great to see you.
You too.